Hello, everyone. Welcome to Brownish Parenting with Dr. Amita on Ruckus Avenue Radio. This show unveils modern Desi parenting topics and explores the latest research for raising our bicultural children. Today, we're going to dive into the South Asian culture and parenting styles. We want to think about parenting styles that have been used in the past and explore the parenting styles that lead to the best outcomes for our bicultural children. Let's first take a look at South Asian culture and how that can influence our views on how we parent. When you think about those Bollywood movies and the way we were raised in the past, there's definitely these fixed roles, responsibilities, and expectations for fathers and for mothers. In my household, I felt like my mother showed us a lot of love by making us all the different types of food that we liked. And my father showed us that he cared by taking more of an active role in being the disciplinarian of our household, but also sitting us down for several hours for what he called math time. So while kids today are growing up with Kumon and Russian School of Math, I always say that I was enrolled in Sunil School of Math. And let's just say that it was definitely more intense because there was no end time. He basically got to decide when that session ended based on how we were performing. So today, I want to move beyond parenting that looks at providing love and discipline through that food, through math time, but really looking at other ways parents can interact with their children and how that impacts the outcomes children have in the future in terms of how they think about themselves, their self esteem, and their self confidence, how they relate to others, the pro social skills that they have, how they regulate their emotions, and then also how they form critical thinking skills to make decisions for themselves, and much more. So, why it's important to talk about parenting styles in general. And so, we know that they lead to better outcomes for children. And so, before we do that, let's talk about what the different parenting styles are. And so, the first parenting style is the authoritarian one. And this is sort of the one we think of when we think of South Asian fathers. They're the strict parent who provides a lot of discipline. They demand obedience from their children, and they do have these fixed set of rules. Sometimes they may use physical punishment when a child disobeys them. And children often do what they're told because they're scared of the repercussions. They often don't talk back. And a common phrase that you're going to hear is because I said so, or it's my way or the highway. Now, at the opposite end of that spectrum, you're seeing the permissive style of parenting. This is where parents are super responsive to their children and they don't really have a lot of rules for them. So, this may be like the South Asian moms, but it can be, again, any parent. Sometimes it could be the dads that are more permissive and the moms that are more authoritarian, or the strict ones. So with permissive, they want to be best friends with their children. They want to be like the cool parent. And so common phrases are things like, sure, you can do that if you want to. And so they don't really follow through with maybe any of the guidelines that are set for their children. And they may use bribes or incentives to get children to do what they want, like getting them to school on time, giving them the phone, or getting them to eat, using the phone to do that, things like that. The next parenting style is uninvolved. And so these parents typically are not very involved with raising their children in terms of love or discipline, and they basically only provide the basic needs for their children. Now, this could be because they're dealing with multiple life stressors that are going on. If you think about like financial stressors, mental health problems, or being addicted to alcohol or other substances, this often leads parents to just not being involved. So that's called uninvolved or neglectful style of parenting. Now, the last parenting style is the authoritative parenting style. This one has a clear and consistent set of rules that parents explain to their children. They're able to balance that love with the discipline so that children know that the rules exist, but they also know why they exist. Parents use a responsive style of parenting to explain to them what those rules are, why they exist, providing them with the rationale. And so common phrases are things like, we are doing it this way because. And if children don't follow the rules, there's usually logical, natural consequences that follow. Now, what happens to South Asian American children based on the parenting styles that we choose? So, what are the outcomes for children? So, let's go back and look at the first one, which was authoritarian. That was the strict parents. And so we know that many Asian American children have parents that are authoritarian, and this leads to something known as the achievement adjustment paradox. So what that means is that children do well in school because their parents are very, very strict about what's expected of them. And again, children do what they're told. And so they often do well in school. So the achievement is there. But what does adjustment mean? And what is that paradox? Well, adjustment means that they don't have the ability to really cope with their emotions. And so they have trouble regulating their emotions. And so they may experience a lot of anxiety or depression because of that. So they often have low levels of self-esteem as well because they don't feel valued. They are not asked about their opinions. They're often just told what to do. And so that's what happens with the authoritarian parenting style when we think about South Asian American children. Now, with the permissive style, which was on the opposite end, parents provide lots of love, don't provide a lot of discipline, or rules. So they do have limited opportunities to practice self-control. They are often able to just give into that instant gratification and do whatever they want. So they lack the self-regulation skills. While they have high levels of confidence, that often leads them to feeling really, really entitled in their lives, like they're better than others. And so they do lack empathy, and this could lead them to turning into bullies as they grow up. Now, with the uninvolved parenting style, this was the one where parents don't provide much love or discipline and only provide the basic needs. Now, this one leads to the worst outcomes for children. They don't feel like they're valued in their families. They have low levels of self-esteem and confidence. They are more prone to aggression, poor academic performance because no one's watching over them, substance abuse. So with this parenting style, they are more emotionally and socially withdrawn as well. Now, the last parenting style we looked at was authoritative, which was balancing that love and discipline. And this does lead to the best outcomes because children's needs are taken into consideration. There's bi-directional communication. Children feel like they can ask questions, they can talk to their parents. There's more of a back and forth. They understand, again, why those rules exist, which help them develop higher level critical thinking skills. Again, they have higher levels of self-esteem and confidence. They are able to make decisions for themselves, be more independent, self-reliant, and they have higher levels of self-control to follow through on the goals that they set in their lives. Now that we have a better understanding of the parenting styles, we're going to pause for a break. When we come back, we're going to talk to our guest, Meenal Doshi, a pediatric social worker, more about parenting and child outcomes. Welcome back. We left off talking about why it's important for parents to think about parenting styles. Today, we have Meenal Doshi, a pediatric social worker with over 20 years of experience, specializing in early intervention, developmental disability, and infant mental health with culturally diverse populations. She's currently seeing patients at Palo Alto Medical Foundation at Dublin and Danville Pediatric Clinics in a short-term bridge mental health program. Her newest project at PAMP is co-facilitating a parenting toddler group for parents of children 18 months to 4 years of age, where she helps parents navigate tantrums, emotional dysregulation, potty training, feeding difficulties, and many more areas of challenge and difficulty. One of the main goals of this group is helping parents to learn and practice tenets of positive relationship-based parenting to prevent parenting challenges later in the parent-child relationship. I want to thank you so much, Mino, for being here to guide us through talking about some of those best practices in parenting. And I think it's only fitting because we actually met in a music together class with our own kids, and we were the only South Asians in that class and connected. So, before we go into more of the parenting, can you just tell us a little bit more about your experiences growing up, where you grew up, and if you always knew you were going to go into this field, like this parent-child relationship? Because as a South Asian, I know sometimes we're limited in our career options. How did you kind of navigate that path?
So I grew up in Los Angeles, in the San Fernando Valley, so the Valley, uh,
Yeah.
as it is known as. I'm from a family of engineers. My dad is
Yeah.
an engineer. My brother is an engineer.
Hmm.
My younger brother had originally gone into finance, but I had the exceptional sort of chance to sort of explore parenting in a way and child development because of my mom. My
Oh.
mom is a retired Montessori teacher.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Child development is
Yeah.
her, like, kind of was her bread and butter. Like
Uh-huh.
at the time, of course, she's sweared by Dr. Spock, which is sort of Bible of
Yeah.
parenting in the 70s and 80s, right?
Uh-huh.
Now we sort of are not totally sure that Dr. Spock had it all right. But
Mhm.
at the time she really relied on that, and she
Yeah.
used a lot of her Montessori training with us
Hmm.
growing up, so
Wow.
she was very support. Both of my
Yeah.
parents were very supportive. I don't know that either one of them thought I would go into social work. And to be
Yeah.
honest, I don't think I thought I would end up doing what I'm doing now. I think I thought I was going to do management and
Hmm.
nonprofit social work.
Yeah.
Um, and then I ended up, kind of doing case management at the regional center. And then when this opportunity came along, I think it
Yeah.
was really just focused on mental health, but I was able to bring my infant mental health background into the work I do at PAMF, and they were so supportive of sort of working
Yeah.
on this group. And it's been just an amazing experience for me to sort
Yeah.
of help families navigate these first few years of life. And what I do
Uh,
see is that when parents, sort of are able to slow down and parent
mhm.
mindfully, they have such better outcomes later on. And
Wow. Yeah.
really the part that I'm most interested in is prevention.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
it is a lot harder when they come back to you and
Mhm.
they're 14 and there's all these struggles going on.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that I definitely did not think I would
Mhm.
be doing this. Um,
But that's also really just fascinating. I didn't realize your mom was a Montessori school teacher,
yes,
and to have that background and to be socialized into that world at such an early age too. It's
yes, and she really understands,
mm-hmm.
and I think is very responsive
Hmm.
to like conversations about child development and parenting.
Yeah.
And I think some of her parenting of us
Uh-huh.
informs the parenting I do with my children. It informs my work.
Yeah.
Conversely, I think there are also things that traditional South Asian parents, my parents included,
Hmm.
have done or choices they made that I will not do with my kids,
Yeah.
and I would not recommend to,
Hmm.
work with, right? So really trying to navigate that line of what can
Hmm.
I take with me and then what can I add to it.
That's
Um,
great. Yeah, having that blueprint, like doing the
mhm.
things that you loved, but then also wanting to change the ways and things that you just didn't love. Yeah, and feel like didn't work. So we're gonna take a break, and when we come
Yeah,
back, we're gonna reflect more on the ways in which we were parented and how that influences us today. Welcome back. You're listening to Brownish Parenting with Dr. Amita on Ruckus Avenue Radio. And then
yeah.
did you feel like there was any triggers like from when you became a parent as you're raising them today? Like were there things that you were like, that's so disrespectful because maybe your parents thought that was disrespectful or like the focus on grades, or are there any things that you feel like have translated or you've had to rethink?
I think for sure. I mean, I think the
Yeah.
focus on grades, which is really common in South Asian families,
Yeah.
not to say that I don't focus on grades with my own kids, but I feel it and see it differently now. I realize
Hmm.
on reflection how, and on my own experience, that, grades in school are fine. Like, sure, you should do your best. You should try to get the best grades you can, but
Yeah.
it's not something that has to define you as a person,
Hmm. Yeah.
or define your abilities, and it's not something that should limit you or make you feel as though you are really limited in what you can do.
Yeah. Hmm.
So, I think that that is something I've rethought. I think that, this idea of connection before correction is something
Yeah.
that I really
Oh,
try
I
to
love that.
implement, you know,
Yeah.
um, that's really that positive, like,
Hmm.
positive parenting idea, positive discipline. It really comes from that,
Yeah, can you
that.
talk a little bit about what, yeah, the connection versus correction?
So it's basically this
Yeah.
idea of, when you are, as a parent, they do something wrong
Yeah.
and you immediately want to just sort of tap that down and
Yeah.
discipline them or
Yeah.
correct them,
Hmm.
right? But it's this idea of connection. If you have a really strong relationship based connection, the
Uh-huh.
correction becomes pretty minimal for the most part.
Yeah. Because
And I,
they also want to be able to connect. And so they want to
yeah,
correct versus
yes,
fighting it off,
exactly.
right? Okay.
Exactly, right? Because they have the basis for really a positive parenting relationship
Hmm.
is having a strong relationship with your kids, is
Yeah.
really making that. time for them, slowing down and, savoring those moments with them.
Yeah.
Because, one of these parenting books, I can't remember, there's a lot of them,
Yeah.
but one of them, I remember reading
Hmm.
something like have 18 summers with them. That's it.
Wow.
18 summers.
Yeah.
That's not a lot.
Yeah.
It seems
Yeah.
like a lot when they're one and you're like in the throes of
Yeah.
diapers and
Yeah.
tantrums and wake ups and whatever,
Hmm.
but it's really not.
I know
It's
it's true. When you're in it day to day, it's so true. You just feel like that's what your life is going to be like. And I remember
yeah,
now I go back to our park, our Emerald Glen Park, and I remember I was like, wow, I'm just going to be here every day on the swings with these kids at this park every day. And then I haven't been back there in so long. And I was like, I can't believe that at one point I thought this was my life every single day to be at this
yeah.
park, to be at these swings. Yeah.
It feels very rote. It
Yeah.
feels very like mundane at the time. And
Yeah.
then when you're out of that time in your life, you really miss those sort of
Hmm.
mundane, that sameness,
Yeah.
the slowness of
Yeah.
that time, because it just gets faster and faster, as you well know. Um,
Yeah.
so, really remembering that your kids are only small and young for a very short time,
Yeah.
and treasuring those opportunities with them. I mean, it really calls into this, to some of my experiences working with families where, I really ask them, so how do you play with your children? What do
Yeah.
you do?
Yeah.
And I feel as though sometimes that is a foreign idea to families.
Yes, I've
It's
heard
sort
this
of
from other
like
therapists as well, that that's what
it's
they're
sort
working
of
on
like
with
I don't know how
the
to do
families. Yeah.
that. I think culturally, it's not something that we are taught because,
Hmm.
my mom used to play with us to some degree, I would say. My
Yeah.
dad, not that
Yeah.
much, you know.
Yeah. Hmm.
And I think that that is probably true with a lot of families
Yeah.
in our generation. Um,
Yeah.
but play and connection are really important. They're really what builds that relationship. One-on-one time,
Hmm.
all special time. There's lots of articles about how effective it is.
Yeah.
It's one of the most effective strategies for
Hmm.
improving behavior.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very simple.
Let's take a break. And when we come back, I want to talk a little bit more about getting into how to do this. Welcome back. You're listening to Brownish Parenting with Dr. Amita on Ruckus Avenue Radio. We're now going to talk to Mina a little bit more about positive parenting. Yeah, Mino, if you could just walk us through what this looks like when parents have young children.
So, this is a really difficult time,
Yeah.
those first, couple of years. I mean, heck, the first couple of months when you bring
Yes.
a baby home is really challenging.
Yeah.
Parents are often really depleted.
Hmm.
They are not sleeping, they are often
Yeah.
not taking care of themselves, they're not eating. They're not sometimes showering. I remember, I'd sometimes be
Yeah.
sitting on the couch with my baby when my husband went to work and
Yeah.
he'd come back and I'd be in the exact same spot. He was like, "You look like you have not moved." And I was like, "Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. Yeah. Because
That's
you
it."
need them to sleep. Yeah. And
They've been
yeah.
asleep or I've been nursing
Yeah.
or that's where I've been.
Yeah.
So, one of the things that I talk about in the group that I'm
Hmm.
facilitating, we talk about self-care. So,
Yes.
self-care is a really hard thing to do as a parent. And, I think it's hard in a lot of ways. It's hard logistically, right?
Hmm.
Sort of finding time when you can take time for yourself when you have a young child is really hard.
Yeah.
Um, but it also involves like a level of, I want to say, like guilt maybe, or just like whether you deserve this for yourself, something
Hmm.
like,
For
right,
South
like
Asians, that's really hard. Self-care is really hard. Like you feel like you just have to give
hard.
everything to your child, and
It feels
especially when they're
indulgent,
young. Yeah.
right? Self-care feels indulgent. It feels
Yeah.
like I should not be doing this for
Hmm.
myself because I
Hmm.
am somehow taking away from my child. But
Yeah.
the reality is you can't pour from an empty cup.
That's so
You
true. Yeah.
cannot give
Yeah.
when there's nothing left in you to
Yeah.
give.
Yeah.
And so I really recommend self-care. I often
Hmm.
ask families, and in the group, we talked about this a lot. Like, what can you do for yourself for like
Hmm.
10 minutes? What can you do?
Yeah. And what are some
Um,
examples of what parents do for self-care? Like when they have these young children, like what does that
yeah,
look like?
lots of things. I
Yeah.
mean, getting outside.
Yeah.
taking a walk, even if the baby's in the stroller,
Yeah.
yeah, okay, maybe you can't find someone to care for the baby for 10 minutes so you can go
Yeah.
for a walk on your own,
Yeah.
but the baby could be in the stroller.
Hmm.
Exercise is really, really important. Um,
Yeah.
getting out to a class if you can and being
Yeah.
with other parents, for
Hmm.
example, that's a form of self-care. Spending time with friends, getting
Yeah.
involved in your
Hmm.
community. I find a lot of families don't have friends, don't have a lot of
Yeah.
parent friends or a lot of local people that they can rely on, especially if they've immigrated from India. This sometimes is really hard. Um,
Yeah. So that's one of the, I guess, like challenges that you're seeing, right? With South Asian parents with young
yes,
families. Is there
yes.
anything else as they get older, like toddler, preschool years? Are there challenges that you're seeing that families are having with connection, with forming these relationships from an early age?
Yes, I mean, definitely. I think I
Yeah.
mentioned play and not
Yeah.
spending time playing is sort of something that I have noticed is very
Uh-huh.
common. Sort of that one-on-one time, like
Yeah.
dedicated one-on-one time where there are no distractions, the parents are putting their phones away, they're not
Yeah.
working, they're not doing other things. I mean, those moments are really meaningful. And
Yeah.
again, it really only needs to be 15 minutes. It doesn't
Hmm.
need to be the whole day at Disneyland. I mean, it
Yeah.
can be, but it
Yeah.
does not need to be that. The
Yeah.
other thing I sort of have really noticed is that parents are sometimes a little bit, I'm not sure if it's fearful, but nervous, anxious about kids crying. Young
Mm.
children crying or getting
Yeah.
really upset and having a tantrum. And I mention that because tantrums are really normal at this
Yeah.
age.
Yeah.
2, 3, 4 year olds, 5 year olds, 6 year
Yeah.
olds, 7 year olds still tantrum, and that is still normal. They are
Yeah.
learning how to regulate their very big, big emotions,
Hmm.
and they need parents to help them handle that.
Yeah.
So feeling that you have to sort of avoid you know, these situations or, sort of not following through on limit setting, all
Yeah.
of those things can really have longer term effects on how that
Hmm.
child grows and develops. Um,
Yeah. Because we just talked about like permissive parenting earlier. And so do
yeah,
you feel like that's what's happening then if you're kind of avoiding and you're just giving in to whatever
yeah.
your child wants because you don't want them to cry?
Yes, no,
Yeah.
absolutely. I think there's a lot of permissive parenting that goes
Yeah.
on. I think that, again, they're really trying to sort of walk on eggshells to
Yeah.
avoid these meltdowns, these
Hmm.
tantrums, this dysregulation that happens. And I feel that's really because they don't know how to handle those situations
Yeah.
in what feels like a successful way. And
Yeah.
I often will reassure parents that just because your child makes a poor choice,
Hmm.
has a tantrum,
Yeah.
loses it in public, those none of those things are reflective on your ability to parent
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
anything that you did as a parent.
Hmm.
And I feel like that's a really powerful message because
Yeah.
so much of the time we as parents
Yeah.
on what these kids do and make ourselves responsible when we could never be responsible for the choices that they make. Um, and
And I'm
so that's
thinking back, yeah,
something.
no, because I'm thinking back to when my kids used to have these tantrums, and you're right, because it's like you just feel like, oh wow, it's like the whole what are other people gonna say? What are other
Oh yeah,
people thinking? And then you
yeah,
personalize it that you
absolutely.
don't have control over your child.
Absolutely. But
Yeah.
there's a lot of reasons that
Uh-huh.
are behind the tantrum, Amita, that
Hmm.
I think are really important for parents to reflect. So, reflection and sort of slowing down and thinking about situations that happen is your most powerful tool as a parent.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sort of thinking back, okay, they had a tantrum in the grocery store. What happened? Like, what was
Hmm.
going on in that moment? Are
Yes.
there any basic needs that were not met that day? So, had they napped? Had
Yeah.
they eaten? Had they
Hmm.
slept well the night before? Were they feeling okay? Did I
Yeah.
push? Did I push
Yeah.
their timing? Were they off routine? A lot of these sorts of things can contribute to how they feel in the moment, and they're
Hmm.
just not able to regulate the way that we as adults can.
Yeah.
I mean, it happens to all of us. I recall my oldest, who is now in high school, but
Yeah.
I remember taking her to the Oakland Zoo, and she was like 2 at the time. And I knew in the back of my head,
Hmm.
I knew I had pushed the envelope with the
Yes.
time. and
Yeah.
they hadn't timed it right.
Hmm.
And sure enough, she had a meltdown at the zoo.
Yeah.
But it was my fault because I really should have
Yeah.
known. I should have stuck to her schedule and taken her out and made sure that she could get a nap.
And
Um,
then, yeah, what are the, like when they're having this tantrum, you're out in a public place,
mhm.
is there, what do you recommend parents do in that moment? Do they, kind of heard that you are just supposed to let this tantrum happen? Because if you try to intervene, it could prolong it.
Yes.
Like, okay, so, and then is there anything else that you recommend doing in the moment?
So my go-to has
Hmm.
always been take them out of there.
Yeah.
Just take them
Okay.
out.
Hmm.
Take them out, take them to your car,
Yeah.
take them to a quiet spot,
Yeah.
take them somewhere out of the situation. Because again, when we as a parent, sort of, you really have to check in with your own
Hmm.
feelings, right? You're
Yeah.
feeling anxious,
Yeah.
you're feeling worried, feeling stressed, it's uncomfortable. It's
I mean, your nervous system's dysregulated, just like theirs is,
yes, your
right?
nervous system
How
is
do you be that
regulated
steady
and you are
presence in their life? Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
And then they are feeding off of the energy that you're giving them.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
you both kind of need a break.
Yeah.
And I don't like to call these breaks timeouts because
Hmm.
timeout really is sort of punitive and
Yeah.
in the way, and
Yeah.
it connotates really punitive
Yeah.
intervention, but
Hmm.
more like I like to call it take a break
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
I'm
I call
moving
it cool off. Yeah. I'm like, you need a cool off,
cool
like
down space
space
is
or
what they
yeah.
call it in
Yeah.
positive discipline.
Yeah.
Positive timeout is
Yeah.
fine. Just sort of take a break, get out of there. We all could use a break, couldn't
That's
we?
good. Yeah. Yeah.
And then trying to help the child regulate. What
Yeah.
I also think is really helpful, especially for example, going to the grocery store or going to Target,
Yeah.
these are places that are notorious for, I mean, how many times have we had a child go in with us to one of these places and then
Yeah.
have a meltdown because we wouldn't buy them something, right?
I
Like,
know. Yeah.
raise my
Yeah.
hand. It's
I'm
definitely
raising my
happened to
hand.
me.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely happened to me.
Yeah.
So set those expectations before you walk into the store.
Yes.
We're
That
only going to
helps.
buy
Yes.
these things. Here's my list. This is all we are going to get. Can you help me find these things?
Yeah.
Harness their natural helping ability, which is
Uh-huh.
so present at this age. And believe me, and I'm sure you could
Yeah.
attest to this too, that helping desire goes away real quick.
Yeah.
They once
Hmm.
they hit elementary school, it's pretty
Yeah.
much gone.
Yeah.
So use them when they are toddlers to
Yeah.
have them help you. Hey, can you
Yes.
help me find the apples? Hey, can you help me find the bananas? They are
Hmm.
naturally able to do that. And this activity in itself builds self-confidence, it builds
Yeah.
self-esteem, it makes them feel empowered, they
Yeah.
feel full and fulfilled. And they feel like they have some kind of expertise, which,
Hmm.
how toddlers can say that most of the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
I love that. I love setting those limits before you go in.
Yeah.
And that has definitely worked because I've definitely had meltdowns at Target when we go to buy birthday present. They think they're getting a present and it's like, that's not happening. So yeah, setting that and then also just letting them play with something in the cart, like while they're in the store, but then they have to put it back.
Yes.
I've seen parents do that.
Yes, give them
Great.
snacks. Food
Yeah.
is a great distractor. When they're
Yeah.
eating, they
Yeah.
will not be crying
I
because they
know. I know. Yeah. I'd have those special snacks. I remember those yogurt melts I used to have in my bag that they loved and only came out during special times and occasions. We'll take a break right now. And when we come back, we will talk a little bit more about the older age groups. Welcome back. You're listening to Brownish Parenting with Dr. Amita. We are now going to talk a little bit more about the school age years and the teenage years and what some of the issues are with older children when it comes to parenting.
so I mean, I'll be honest, one of the biggest issues that I find that comes to a head is screen time.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I don't think I'm
We
the
are
only one.
all battling screen time. We're all battling screen time here. Yes.
I swear, I think one week I probably had the same conversation about screen time with like four different families that week.
Wow.
Um, so
Yeah.
screen time is challenging for a lot of reasons, as a lot
Hmm.
of parents are experiencing. Um, I think there is this idea of developmental expectation. So I hear from a lot of South Asian and Indian families that, they should be able to manage this by now. They should be able to take care of this by now. Like
Hmm.
they should know this is too much. And so when we're talking about a school age child, and I'm thinking of really like 6 to like 11, 6 to
Yeah.
12 is kind of
Hmm.
what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
That expectation is really not developmentally appropriate.
Oh, yeah.
And it's really quite difficult for a child of that age. And in fact, honestly, some adults,
Yeah.
internet addiction is in fact
Yeah.
recognized as
Hmm.
a diagnosable condition now, right?
Wow.
So
Yeah.
this idea of being able to manage that is very
Hmm.
challenging for
Yeah.
children. And what I find that really makes that hard too for parents and kids is the lack of clarity. Uh,
Hmm.
so I'll share an example of a family that I was working with where, the parents would just sort of say, now it's time to turn it off, and the child would have a tantrum.
Yeah.
And I feel like this might have been a 9-year-old boy, I think. And,
Hmm.
what I really was noticing when they were talking about this is I couldn't tell what the appropriate amount
Yeah.
was for them, like what they
Hmm.
felt like was enough. And if
Yeah.
I couldn't tell as the therapist, how is the child supposed to know this?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so clarity around what are those expectations?
Hmm.
That limit, coming to agreements with the child before we let them watch the
Yeah.
screen or whatever. Um, Being mindful about when we introduce mobile devices for these
Yeah.
kids. Is there a necessity for the device? I think that's
Hmm.
the first question.
Yeah.
Um, Sometimes that might seem like, well, all my friends have one. Well,
Hmm.
all your friends have one, but do you need to actually have one?
Yeah.
And there is if there's not a sort of concrete need, then
Hmm.
I think it's important to really think through that and be
Yeah.
mindful that when you allow them access to such a device. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
my general recommendation is no, so children should not have access to their parents' phones,
Hmm.
period.
Hmm.
No, no watching, no movies, nothing off of their parents' phones. And that's just really a safety precaution, frankly,
Hmm.
because the parent's phone has no parental controls,
Yeah.
obviously.
Yeah.
And the child can get to all kinds of corners of the internet on
Yes.
parent phone.
Yeah.
Also, I find creates a problem when you want to restrict it later. So then they know your
Hmm.
passcode, they know, they can access your apps, all of that becomes
Wow. Yeah.
later.
Yeah.
So no parental access to phones and devices.
Hmm.
Um, no screens an hour before bedtime. That's a pretty
Yeah.
basic requirement or
Hmm.
criteria I tend to keep in mind just
Yeah.
because it can really disrupt sleep.
Yeah.
No screens during meal times
Hmm.
is something that is very prevalent in the South Asian community, and I'm not
Hmm.
sure where that comes from exactly. I think
Yeah.
sometimes it comes from other caregivers providing care to the child. So grandparents
Yeah.
sometimes
That's true.
feel like
Yeah.
this is something
Hmm.
that makes tasks easier, feeding specifically easier. But what we
Yeah.
know through research is that when children are distracted during meal times, they tend to not be able to regulate the amount that they are eating. So they're not
Hmm.
mindfully eating, they're not staying
Yeah.
present while they're eating, and they
Yeah.
often overeat. Um,
Hmm.
and we really want those kids to know when they are full. So they really need to be mindfully eating. So no screens during meal times. Meal
Hmm.
times should be taken at the table. If meal times can be done as a family, that's a great thing to
That's
do. But
huge. Yeah. Like so much
it's
research supporting
huge.
just those conversations, like you were saying, the
Absolutely.
connection, checking in with
Absolutely.
them.
It
And
it it's really a game
yeah.
changer. And this
Yeah.
is true even in the teen years. So this is
Yeah.
something that trying to do that at least a
Hmm.
few times a week, because then again, you're ticking off a lot of boxes, as you mentioned, right? You're
Hmm.
doing connection time, you're having some mindful eating time, you're
Yeah.
having opportunity to sort of relate to each other and check in. It's super
Hmm.
important. Another really important, like I think helpful strategy is
Hmm.
sort of setting it up where non-preferred activities happen before preferred activities. So if
Yeah.
you if you say, okay, they refuse to do homework. Well, why? Well, they
Hmm.
come home, they kind of relax, they watch some TV, they have a snack, and
Hmm.
then they want to do their homework. So
Yeah.
switch that around. So come home, have a snack, do your homework, and then TV is available to you. I
Yeah.
really like
Hmm.
to use that language. Screen time is now available. So again,
Yeah.
I'm not taking it away.
Yeah.
I'm making it available.
Yeah. And you're
And
setting parameters around it, right?
I'm
Yeah.
setting
Hmm.
parameters, and it's
Yeah.
really that language that's
Uh-huh.
important, right? Because the
Yeah.
taking away sounds really punitive, but
Hmm.
giving it and making it available is really positive. And it just that shift, I think, can really switch things in the child's mind as well.
Yeah.
And it's time management. You are
Hmm.
basically planting the seeds of time
Yeah.
management in
Yeah.
your young child's mind, right?
Yeah.
These are skills that they're going to need for the rest of their life and
Yeah.
definitely in middle school and high school,
Yeah.
right? So, less screen time obviously equates to, increased focus, increased attention,
Hmm.
attention span, all of those things are made better. I mean, there's a lot of books out now related to
Yeah.
increased screen time and increased anxiety and all of that kind of stuff. So you're really
Hmm.
setting them up for success
Yeah.
by setting these parameters in place.
Yeah, and I liked how you just mentioned like attention span focus because as they get older, I feel like it's so important to explain why you want to limit it and like to teach them how it's habit forming, it's addictive, the likes, the loops that they're explaining to them, like how the brain is working in this way, because I feel like that really resonates with teenagers as they get older, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's really about empowering
Hmm.
parents. Yes, our teen or our school age child is telling us, well, we want this, we want access to this. All of our friends are doing this.
Yeah.
We sometimes are succumbing to that peer pressure almost. I
Yeah.
kind of liken it to pre pressure. We're almost succumbing to that pressure
Yeah.
and giving in because that is a very easy route to follow. It is a
Hmm.
lot harder to say no. I
Yeah.
mean, that's a very challenging thing to do.
Yeah.
And yes, they will be upset and yes, they will be unhappy, but that is
Hmm.
okay. It
Yeah.
is their right to feel angry. It is their right to feel upset.
Yeah.
And empathy around that is often really helpful. So, in understanding that, yes, it sucks when you're the only one at school that doesn't have a phone. That
Yeah.
does. And I'm
Yeah.
sorry that that is happening. I'm sorry you feel that way, that you're, having to feel this way. And I also know that this is best for our family.
All right, we're gonna take a break. Welcome back to Brownish Parenting. We are at the end here, and so I just wanted to talk a little bit more with Meenal about what parents can do if they haven't been practicing like authoritative parenting or positive parenting. Where can they start, especially if they have older kids?
Yeah, I mean, I think the good news is it's never too late.
Yeah,
It's not like they're ruined for life.
yeah, yeah.
You can still get in there and
Uh-huh.
build relationships with them. You can still, you can still work through some of these challenges. One
Hmm.
of the tools I like, and this is really for any age, is family meetings.
Oh, I
Um,
love it. Yes.
Positive discipline has
Uh-huh.
like kind of it's like a breakdown, almost like an outline of a family meeting and what that looks like. And I
Uh-huh.
almost kind of liken it to a business meeting.
Yeah.
Family meetings, I don't know about your family, but when
Hmm.
we have family meetings, it
Yeah.
generally means that we had done something we were not supposed to. And it was not fun. I
Yeah.
remember feeling lots of trepidation about those experiences.
Yes. Yes.
Family meetings can be a regular tool that you
Uh-huh.
use every month or
Yeah.
every 2 weeks. And it's an opportunity to connect, it's an opportunity to check in,
Yeah.
it's an opportunity to have everybody at the table.
Yeah.
And you can do them as with kids as young as like 5 or so,
Yeah. Yeah.
teenagers, and using that time to, for example, not just talk about behavior because
Hmm.
that's not fun, but
Yes.
also talk about trip planning, for example. If you're taking
Yeah.
summer vacation, let's all talk
Yeah.
about the things, what our priorities are, what are we interested in doing.
Yeah.
So family meetings are a great way to
Hmm.
start building those relationships and making time and
Yeah.
space for each other. And especially when that you have teens in high school who are very busy, who have
Uh-huh.
lots of academic responsibilities and
Yeah.
volunteering and activities and things, this is a safe space and a really dedicated space to just connect with them and
Yeah.
check in and reflect.
Yeah.
It is also, again, a time to talk about hard situations, hard
Hmm.
conversations,
Yeah.
but it's a way to collaborate. And I love this idea of
Mhm.
collaborative parenting because, especially, I mean, this is something, again, you can use when they're 5. Just because they're
Hmm.
5 doesn't mean that they don't have expertise. They do,
Yeah.
expert on themselves, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So using that, harnessing that to really
Uh-huh.
allow them to input about what they think would be helpful or what they think would be, how they
Hmm.
want something to go. So if you're disagreeing with your teen, for example, on
Yeah.
screen time,
Hmm.
okay, fine. We disagree. We agree that we want you to do well in
Hmm.
school. We agree we want you to focus on what you need to focus and get some things done.
Yeah.
How do we get there together? What can we do?
Yeah.
Taking the blame at,
Hmm. Yeah.
so, I oftentimes parents feel they have to shame kids and
Hmm.
blame kids into getting them to comply.
Yeah.
I really, when I think about that,
Hmm.
it saddens me because, so Dr. Jane Nelson of Positive Discipline,
Uh-huh.
she said, why do parents feel like we have to make kids feel bad about themselves?
I know. Yeah. And it's so common in our culture because it's something
It's
that's happened
so
to us growing up.
It's so
And
common in our
yeah,
culture, and I've
yeah,
heard it from lots of patients. The things
yeah.
that parents say
Hmm.
just really detrimental. And as much
Wow.
as the parent might say,
Yeah.
"Well, I didn't really mean it," the child takes
Yeah.
whatever
They heard it. Yeah.
into their
Hmm.
psyche and it stays there.
Yeah.
It
Hmm.
it just, builds a house in there and it stays
Hmm.
there for decades, I think sometimes.
Wow.
Um,
Yeah.
and but yet we can still do something about that. We
Hmm.
can go back and repair.
Yeah.
And repair is a really foreign concept in South Asian
Hmm.
culture. Taking
Yeah.
responsibility as a parent, parent as not the expert,
Yeah.
parent as, as the model, the role model for repair and
Yeah.
taking responsibility.
And that's probably where they should start, right? Like when you think about if they
Absolutely.
have older kids and all of a sudden they're having these family meetings, you start with, hey, look, I haven't been doing this, taking responsibility and
Absolutely.
acknowledging that I'm not the expert, I'm still learning here.
Absolutely. And
And
again, I can still set a limit.
yeah,
I can still I can still apologize for maybe
yeah,
yelling at you or embarrassing you
yeah.
or humiliating you.
Hmm.
I can do that and I can still set the limit at the same time. And that sometimes I think to some South Asian families feels
Yeah.
really disingenuous, but it's
Hmm.
not. They're two
Yeah.
different things. I
Yeah.
can nurture you as a parent, and yet I can still say, you know what? I'm sorry, your phone is, you have to put your phone away. I can
Yeah.
still do both of those things.
Yeah.
Um, I can be kind but firm. Absolutely.
Hmm.
So I think that that part is really, it's really interesting to me, that, sort of, um, that South Asian parents often humiliate and demean and
Yeah.
embarrass
Hmm.
and say things that, I question how they would never say this to a work colleague. So how is
Yeah.
it okay to say it to your child?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think a lot of times, I think they don't realize that communicating in the way we were just talking about in family meetings works.
It
And so
works.
you have to try it to realize that this actually works and the detrimental outcomes that you just talked about with the other way, because maybe the other way also works because maybe their child will then put it away or do all, whatever they need them to do, but they're not realizing what the outcomes are going to be later on in life,
It breeds
right?
resentment. It,
Yeah.
it sort of feels, like
Hmm.
a not a strong relationship with your parent. And I think this
Yeah.
way you can do both really. You can
Yeah.
have that connection, you can have that sort of loyalty to each
Yeah.
other, without the blame, without the shame.
Yeah, and I love how you brought those like dichotomies together, right? So like
Mhm.
being kind and firm, like being able to be both. And
Yeah.
a funny story about just a family meeting that I had to share with you is that when I first started, I didn't really know what I was doing. And so again, it became very much about like us blaming each other about everything that was going wrong. And my
Yes.
kids were like, no, we don't want family meetings. But once we started doing it the right way, where we like started with the compliments to the kids and ended with like a board game or going to
Yeah.
Yogurt Land or something like that,
Absolutely. Yeah.
they were looking forward to, they would ask me, we were
Yeah.
talking about travel plans. They were like, hey, when's our next
Yeah.
family meeting? It's also a great way to table like those heated discussions that you have because now I just literally repeat, we're gonna talk about a family meeting. We're gonna talk about a family meeting because when you come to family meeting, you're usually well rested, you've eaten, there's a time for it.
You can have an agenda. You can
Yeah.
have like a sort of
Yeah.
a written
Yeah.
agenda. I recommend putting it on your
Hmm.
fridge. Everybody can add to it.
And
But,
they love that. They love that they're going to get to talk about something that they've been waiting to talk to their parents about. Yeah.
Everybody has a voice at the table.
Yeah.
Everybody's viewpoint is important. It's
Hmm.
not, very hierarchical. It's actually very egalitarian.
Yeah.
And kids, young children especially, really love that because one,
Yes.
their opinion valued. But aside from family meetings are something you can do from time to time, but
Hmm.
I advise parents to think about those times when teens are ready to talk. And
Mhm.
it's not often or all the time per se, but
Yeah.
it does sometimes happen when we are not ready to listen. And that's
Yeah.
a really important point. So
Yeah.
sometimes we're ready to like tick things off our list. I
Yeah.
know it's true for me. And all of a
Mhm.
sudden, my 16-year-old's like, I want to tell you about this thing that happened in school. And I'm
Yeah.
like, sorry, I've got 15 things to do and dinner on the table.
Yeah.
So when that happens, finding space to allow those conversations to continue, or
Yeah.
you can even say, look, we're going to put a pin in it. I really want to hear this. I
Mhm.
carve out some time after dinner. Does that work for you? So letting
Yeah.
me know that, look, hold that for a little while,
Mhm.
and I'm still here and I want to hear you.
Yeah.
So when teens are ready to talk, it happens, like I said, it happens at these weird times.
It does. It does. And I've heard this from so many people where you just have to then be ready to listen and not also be resentful of, oh, well, when I wanted to say something to them, they blurted something out at me that was rude. And so now I'm not listening and going down that route as well. Because,
And that's a great
yeah,
segue. I mean, that is something else I wanted to keep in mind too, is
yeah.
forgiveness and
Hmm.
putting things to bed.
Yeah.
A lot of times I hear from my teen patients that, my mom or my dad keeps bringing up things that happened
Hmm.
like 2 years ago or something I
Wow.
did
Hmm.
a long time ago, and they keep bringing it up, and I
Yeah.
hate it.
Yeah.
Put those things to bed. These
Yeah.
are
Yeah.
children. They are
Yeah.
very young, even if
Yeah.
they're 16, even if they're 17, they are
Hmm.
very young.
Yeah.
16, 17 is not very old.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
are still learning and they are still
Hmm.
growing and
Yeah.
they are still changing. And we want to show them like we want to model a really positive relationship. This is the
Yeah.
first relationship they ever have in their
Hmm.
life. It will impact all of their future relationships,
Hmm.
their significant others, their friends, all
Yeah.
of that stems from this first relationship.
Hmm.
On the flip side, I feel very strongly about disrespect.
Yeah.
In no uncertain terms, I am very clear with my teens about how they should talk to their parents, that it's absolutely okay to disagree
Hmm.
because you have your own mind.
Yeah.
You're not a
Yeah.
robot,
Hmm.
but it is never okay to be disrespectful in how you communicate.
Yeah.
However, parents have to really model that respectful communication
Yeah.
because that is
Yeah.
going to receive whatever they're seeing at home. That is
That,
what they're going to like
yeah.
throw right back at you.
Hmm.
You are disrespectful in how you communicate just because it's your child, and I think that that is something that happens with South Asian families because
Yeah.
that is the modeling that they have from how they were parented.
Hmm.
And that is something we often go through when I talk to families is how were you parented when you were young?
Yes.
And a lot of that really is flowing with how they parent their children. So we examine that this is a
Yeah.
new way of parenting.
So they have to unlearn what they
Yeah.
were socialized into. And then,
And when we talk about, these parents and their relationship to their parents, it's very eye-opening.
yeah.
You really see that there wasn't this close relationship.
Hmm.
And maybe there didn't have to be because if they grew up in India, they were
Hmm.
in a joint family, there was lots of people around, they were never alone, they
Yeah.
were parented by lots of adults.
Yeah.
It's a very different model to what we
Hmm.
have here. We are
That's
living
true.
in
Yeah.
silos. We are
Hmm.
very individual families.
Hmm.
There's often no family support. So
Yeah.
that model no longer translates very well.
Yeah, that's so true. Wow, you've given us so much to think about when we think of how to incorporate love and limits, connection over correction. I would love just talking to you, and I'm sure the audience would too. So, can you just let us know where we can find you and how we can reach you?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm currently working at Palo Alto Medical Foundation, as Amita alluded to. So you can absolutely see me if you are a PAMF or I believe a
Mhm.
Sutter patient as well. You can be referred by your pediatrician to my program, which is called Healthy Young Minds. Um,
Nice.
And so you could be referred that way. That's a really easy, streamlined way to access me.
Mhm.
I'm also on LinkedIn on Meenal Doshi. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, so you can find me that way. You can also email me. It's Meenal M Doshi at gmail.com. So that's another great way to reach me. I'm not yet doing private practice, but I don't know. Who knows? I've been
Yeah.
able to do it, so maybe in the future. But
Okay.
but yes, thanks so much. Thanks so much, Amita, for having me. I really appreciate this opportunity to
Yeah, thank you so
talk about
much. All right.
it.
Week, we will be talking to Aru Patwardhan, a senior at the Waldorf School of the Peninsula, to amplify student voices and to hear his perspective on South Asian American identity, life, and what parents can do to help children today. Stay tuned.